science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Subliminal salutations, all you cognonauts out there, and welcome to Exofathom, the show that dares to explore the outside reaches of understanding. I am your host for the evening, Nick, and I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-hosts, Ayla and Mike. How you doing, Ayla?
I feel lovely. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. I can't complain. It is Monday. Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Monday, Mike. How's it going?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. I might choke on this coffee flavored water. There
you gotta love that. Yeah. I like a little bit of water with my coffee. That's the way I take it.
It's too much. I should have just had it in powdered form. I think
just make it in sludge and I'm good.
With a cube of ice.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you guys for tuning in this evening. We're hoping you're having a wonderful Monday evening. This episode, I wanted to get into the concept of the lizard brain. This is sort of something that we hear colloquially a lot, I would say, especially maybe more with the advent of the internet. This concept is kind of propagated a bit more, I would think. But before we jump into all of the good stuff, I wanted to ask you guys, how's your lizard brain feeling?
It's feeling a little toasty. I feel like I'm in a trauma soup right now, but
so it seems like it's probably pretty exhausted.
Yeah, that.
Mike, what about you?
I guess it's like a little sluggish. It's warming up. It's like it's a bit cold right now, so it needs to like lay in the sun.
Yes.
I'll get there.
Got to bask in the warmth of security. Well, yeah. But yeah, anyways, I wanted to just kind of get into this topic because I thought it would be an interesting little dive into just kind of a simple subject. But most of the time when I look into episodes, I'm kind of surprised by the way they turn out to be, as opposed to what I had thought they were going to be. So I was kind of going into this episode thinking that I was going to be talking more about this sort of scientific explanation of what the lizard brain is, and the sort of like every time I think of lizard brain, I think of the Water Boy with Colonel Sanders. Something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
That's good. Well, it's funny because you talked about the episode seemingly being simple, and then you dive in and you're like, it's not that simple. And I don't know why, but I got an image of like a lizard with like a backwards hat, and it's crossing its arms, and it's like in your face.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that was like the little image I got. I had to share.
I got schooled by a 90s gecko.
Crisscross.
Yeah. A hip hop gecko from the 90s. Yeah, no, I mean, so, I was researching this topic because, I've heard this many times before, and I think that you probably are familiar with the concept. But if you're are unfamiliar, for our listeners, the lizard brain, at least colloquially, I'll say that for right now, refers to sort of like this baser instinctual mechanism that we as humans have. And it's a reference to this concept of each human having a prehistoric bit in their brain that goes all the way back to our reptile ancestors. And so when I initially started looking into this episode, I was thinking to myself, oh, that'll be interesting. I'd like to see like the science behind that and how that came to be over time. And I quickly realized that this sort of concept isn't actually factual in any respect. It was thought to have once been factual, but upon further research, it's apparently been sort of conflated and understood, kind of like, how they have that statistic that we only use 10% of our brain at any given time. how that like statistic gets tossed around everywhere when it's actually not true.
You just can't. You just can't. That's like the whole basis for Lucy. You can't just uproot that whole.
Yeah, it
like,
is the whole
pin
basis
for, the
for
whole film.
Lucy. Yeah, and that's why the film is ridiculous, because in actuality we use all of our brain. It's just that, you know, perhaps certain parts of our brain aren't active, you know, when we're doing a specific task, but you're utilizing all of your brain. So sorry for all of you people out there who thought perhaps you could take a pill and expand your brain potential, but apparently that's not possible. And just like that, this whole concept of a lizard brain isn't technically scientifically true. But what I think is interesting and far more better for a conversation is the sort of metaphor that we've created around it. And so before I get into the metaphor, I'll give you a little bit of background about where this came from in the sort of rigid scientific history explanation. And then we can get more into the metaphor stuff later down the road. But the origin of the lizard brain complex comes from the triune brain model, and it was formulated in the 1960s by Paul D. MacLean. And the concept arose in popularity actually because Carl Sagan references it in one of his books. The book was called The Dragons of Eden. And so because Sagan actually put it in his book, not necessarily, and he actually responded to this later on, he didn't necessarily mean for it to be a literal sort of a description of this sort of baser reptilian ancient relic of piece of brain that we might have in each of us. It was supposed to be more of a metaphor, but nevertheless, it kind of caught like wildfire, and the consensus was that there is this sort of primordial brain living inside of our brains. But the triune brain consists of basically the reptilian complex, which is what we're speaking of right now, the paleo-mammalian complex, which is the limbic system, which would be right above the reptilian complex, and then the neo-mammalian complex, which is our neocortex, what we normally see as the brain, the frontal lobes, the top, the big parts. But they were viewed as independently conscious and as structures sequentially added to the forebrain in a course of evolution. So meaning they thought, at least this MacLean guy thought, that what happened was a reptile had a certain brain. Over time, it evolved into a mammal, or was it paleo mammal, so a shrew or some sort of ground-dwelling mammal. That brain kind of grew over the reptile brain. And then eventually we have this human brain through the neo-mammalian complex, the neocortex, that grew over those two brains. And so it was this kind of idea that we had these three structures or strata of the brain that were independently operating and kind of in flux and combat with each other, which I always thought it's kind of like a cool concept in my sort of, you know, mental experiment scape perhaps. But the hypothesis has been subject to criticism, and it's no longer espoused by the majority of comparative neuroscientists post 2000 area. And I was able to cite this particular paper that's entitled "Your Brain is Not an Onion with a Tiny Reptile Inside." And it's by Joseph Cesario, David J. Johnson, and Heather L. Ivesine. And it was published in psychological. Do I sound like my grandfather for a second? Like my Persian grandfather. Psychological Science entitled. And so the abstract for this paper is that a widespread misconception in much of psychology is that as vertebrate animals evolved, newer brain structures were added over existing older brain structures, and that these newer, more complex structures endowed animals with newer and more complex psychological functions, behavioral flexibility, and language. This belief, although widely shared in an introductory psychological textbook, has long been discredited amongst neurobiologists and stands in contrast to the clear and unanimous agreement on these issues among those studying the nervous system evolution. So, and obviously that's a whole paper. They get into all the science as to why it wasn't brains growing on brains like a Russian nesting doll, which I guess in in retrospect sounds a little bit silly. But do you guys have anything to add and you want to say about that before I keep prattling on?
Well, you're not prattling. It's pretty interesting stuff. I think, the way that the human brain was shaped is something that I never really thought about, in the sense that, like, I'm just poof here. But, like how you get from point A to point B from an evolutionary standpoint, not to say that I haven't thought about, like the what is it, from all fours to bipedalism to, like, that evolution, but I'm talking about more specifically like the brain itself as an organ and how that would have developed, because it just seems so weird that it would develop with like this little, like it would develop outwards. Though it makes sense too, because like that's how like seashells, like everything's circular, or what is it, circular, and like spirally when you look at nature and stuff. So I mean, I guess that makes sense too.
Yeah. Well, and it's speaking to something that is true. It's like an approximation of truth, because your lower brain is responsible for what we call the reptilian brain characteristics. And then above that, you have the limbic system, which is in charge of emotions. And then you have the neocortex on top, which is in charge of logic and reasoning and all of that stuff. So in essence, there is some truth to that. It's just that they're not, structures that grew on top of structures. It's more that the whole thing kind of evolved similarly in the same sort of path, just that it may, like it, I don't know. It still has the same sort of function that we're looking at, and that's why I'm having a little bit of a difficult time, because it seems to me that there's a little bit of semantics going on, because from what I understood of it as, at least in the colloquial sense, is that it's more of a metaphor and a representation or an illustration of the way the brain works, not an actual explanation as to how our brains evolved over time.
Oh, I'm sorry. My listening comprehension must be really bad tonight.
No.
Thought it was the reverse.
There's nothing that you said that was contrary to what I'm saying. Actually, I was just saying that I think it's like this particular paper that we're talking about seems to be splitting hairs a little bit, at least in the sense that, perhaps in the evolutionary biology, this is not the way this happened, but these brain strata structures still represent in the same sort of way. If that makes any sense. Maybe it doesn't.
It makes sense. I mean, like, the problem with biopsychology is that it's always changing. There's always been issues with, like, they haven't really figured much out from that point of view. So it would have been cool that if it did grow kind of like an onion, like you have these cyclical patterns growing on top, or cyclical, I don't know, I'm just going to call them components of the brain, growing outward and outward until, you have what we are right now, because it would imply that going far further down the line, you would have like giant gray head aliens, big giant heads. But the fact that they kind of, I guess, grew in parallel, I can see that making sense. But I do see where it's like we are just kind of splitting hairs, because the autonomic functions are still there in like the base part of your brain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that sublimbic system still responsible for all of your breathing and your nervous system responses and all that stuff. Correct.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was trying to illustrate. Thank you for clarifying, because that's kind of where I was getting to, is just like, yes, it's the evolutionary biology is incorrect, but the metaphor still holds true. And I think that that's kind of where I want to take the direction of this conversation, is that may not. Oh yes, Ayla, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, because I went to the source text,
Yes.
I'm looking at the abstract and diving in, and it seems that one of the key points of contention is resting in the confidence of knowledge accumulated by those studying nervous system evolution. And I know the nervous system has been something that a lot of folks have been talking about of recent times because that's like a whole circuitry that does run counter to that like Russian nesting doll kind of figure in your mind, but it's this like outward spindly, very complex network.
Root system.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I can see that point. So it's interesting to read this, and then I'd be so interested to hear like, top psychologists' reactions and just get a lay of the land of like, okay, what direction are we going?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just basically wait 5 years and you might be in a totally new territory apparently. So, yeah.
You have a few like nervous systems there. You have like your parasympathetic and your sympathetic, right? One's responsible for fight or flight, and the other one's responsible for like just chilling out and just hanging around, I think. And the way that they are tied in together is I don't know if it says anything in there, but it is interesting. It almost sounds like it's like a tree metaphor that could be made outside of like the lizard metaphor, I guess. Where, like you have these complex root systems growing like throughout your whole body, and then in your head has like this little sapling that's violent and crazy that we can see as a lizard. And then and then beyond that is like just the human or like the mammalian side, where it's I don't know, a bit less violent and crazy.
Yeah.
Whoa, are you saying the entire biosphere is somehow replicated by our bodies?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
As below, so above.
Oh, Mano.
But yeah,
that's
I mean,
a craft reference for those of you who don't know.
Nice. Yeah, no, I appreciate that I was able to sort of explain what I meant about that, because I think that that's, as I said, where I want to take the conversation, because there seems to be a lot in this catch-all that we call the lizard brain, and there's like it from my reading, it's in charge of a lot of things. Mike mentioned a couple things, and the breathing regulation is one that we do without thinking, and thank goodness, because if you ever had like, could you imagine ever having to think to breathe?
Yeah.
Did
you ever do that? Like, did you ever try to focus on your breathing and then get lost for like 10 minutes like, trying to not think about your breathing?
Yeah, and then you slip into like nirvana because you hit like some sort of enlightenment as a child Buddha.
Well, I don't know about that. I've had the opposite though. I fell really hard and had the like, what do they call it? The wind knocked out of you. But
that's the worst.
Have you ever had that happen to you?
Oh yeah.
Because you're sitting there like, I need to breathe.
Yeah.
But I suddenly can't. And it's terrible. But it's also like, once you can breathe again, you're like, oh, that's so easy. But
and that's just like a little sac below your lungs. That's like, nope, clenches up, and then all of a sudden you can't breathe anymore.
Get that gasping, that that sound.
I just think of the body as like, I don't know, like a bunch of little organs working together, and this one organ's like, oh, we're gonna shut down, and everyone's like, no, turn it back on, and this one organ's like, no, what did you think? And they're like, no, turn it back on. And like, there's just this whole fight. And
it would be a nightmare if you had to be conscious of all of the automatic things that happen in your body. There'd be no sleeping for sure.
Oh, that'd be the worst.
That would be terrible. But there is a list of things that I was able to find that the lizard brain is responsible for. Again, we're using this catch-all term, not necessarily any sort of scientific term, but basically the lower portion of your brain, if you will. But it's and this is seems the most primary, and this is something that I want to explore a concept with you guys. But the lizard brain seems to primarily be for pain avoidance, or you could reinterpret that as self-preservation. And then, like Mike said, breathing regulation. It's also the drive for reproduction, so libido, drive to find a mate, all of that kind of stuff.
Hey.
Hey, it was Valentine's Day, so there you go. I hope you're using your lizard brains out there yesterday.
Yeah,
Sorry,
not
that
now.
came
Listen
in.
to this now.
Yeah,
Don't use it right
No, not right now.
I feel like I was 20,000 years too late for my A, but I was because I kept my heater on, so I'm muting while you're talking, and I had to unmute. But yeah, I had to get that in there. That giggity. Okay.
Yes, of course. No, I appreciate it. And there's a couple other things that I thought were interesting. It has a role in playing for motivation and focus, which I thought was very kind of interesting. And it's also in charge in part with decision making, at least impulsive sort of decision making. So with that said, and there are some other functions as well, but these are the ones that sort of struck me as the most prominent and the most critical. Um, it- we've already kind of parsed out. One of my questions was, do you think it's better served as a metaphor? But I would like to know, maybe, do you think that we're harming the perspective by calling it the lizard brain? Does that have a certain negative connotation that might not be completely applicable to this set of functions?
Well, if you had asked me pre Jurassic World, I might have said yes. But thinking about those raptors and, you talked about playing a role in motivation and focus. What did they do? They lied in wait. That was a predatory response. They were smart. They hunted in a group. So I think the heart of that question is, how do you feel about lizards? And I'm cool with
Any
them.
chance you can get to mention Jurassic Park?
I like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I think that reptiles in general are pretty cool. They exist in a weird frequency, I feel. Because what are they thinking about? I don't think they do. I mean, I don't know.
I don't
We
know
didn't
either.
think chickens thought a lot of stuff until more recently there were tests to back it up. So I'd be really interested to see the research on lizard perception. But until then, I'm cool with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that what I mean to get with this sort of question is that it seems as though that while lizard brain can be in charge of certain and I don't even want to say bad, because it's like, okay, socially unacceptable, maybe even personally unacceptable behaviors. It also is in charge of a lot of necessary and good things. So I just wonder if there's any stigma attached to the term lizard brain. But I mean, if you're cool with it, I'm cool with it too.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can think of is a Simpsons reference to some sort of lizard people theory, but I don't think that that's real. So I don't know. I mean, unless that itself is a metaphor.
I mean, I think it's useful as a metaphor, right? As far as lizards and animals and reptiles go, they can be useful to kind of set up as models. I mean, you have the model of the python, right, that will starve itself for up to a year waiting for, something to come by to eat. But to win oneself on impulsivity isn't always the best thing. It's a really stochastic online model that can be detrimental.
Yeah.
To maybe not. So it all depends on how you view yourself, right? Because being impulsive in itself isn't bad. It's just what you do when you are impulsive, and the group that, because we're social animals, so it's not like you can just be like a lone impulsive wolf out there.
Right.
So it depends on your, but for example, if you're an option trader and you dropped just an impulsive a bunch of money on call options on Tesla, 420 call options on Tesla, and Tesla moons that week, and you made millions of dollars. That was all lizard brain running.
Yes.
And that's a great way to use that impulsivity. So for a metaphor, I think it's useful, but I don't think, I mean, there may be stigmas that are attached to it, but like all stigmas, those are kind of just constructs.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to listen to them. You can use that higher brain function to decide if you want to act on the lizard brain, or you can use not the higher brain. You can use the human brain function to decide if you want to act on the lizard brain functions.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. And there's, to me, it seems like pain avoidance is a vital function for, obviously survival, but it do you think that it's better that the mechanism, because I was thinking truly about this, and I was thinking like, okay, well, if the limbic system, not the limbic system, sorry, if the reptilian complex is sort of in charge of this pain avoidance slash self-preservation sort of instinct, do you think that's better that it's a subconscious thing, or would it be better if we were able to utilize our neocortexes to assess that sort of thing? Because I think about it, like it could be useful in the in the circumstance that you might be in danger and you have that instinct to just run without any like understanding of what's going on. People have done that before to escape bad situations, but it also could lead to something catastrophic, like making a terrible decision out of sheer fear.
Yeah, I think there's a professor, Zapolsky is his last name, and he wrote a book about stress, and it was about kind of these like autonomic responses that we have to external stimulation. So, like our brains don't really, I guess from his perspective, our brains don't really know that we're not in the forest still, that we're not still in like the Serengeti or something like that. So, this pain avoidance gets tethered to like fight and flight and freeze, and and that's tied into the nervous system. And so Zapolsky, he wrote a really cool book, and what it was saying is that like your brain doesn't know the difference between being eaten by a lion or a scary email that just popped up that's like, oh, hey, I just dropped this big ball. And like the same bodily embodied responses that you have to that email, according to your lizard brain, it's like, no, you're going to get eaten. You need to run and like protect yourself. So, like definitely in the wilds, that's a good thing to have. Like the hairs stand up on your back when you feel like a predator is near or something like that. But, our brains are complex. And like Mike had alluded to, we're also social creatures. So our brain starts to like get these patterns where we notice things that are happening out there and we make associations. And then you get this really complex soup of like stimuli that your brain is saying to do something in reaction to something that your conscious brain might not even be aware of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say you shouldn't have to think about it, like, because if you're in a fight, right, or fight or flight, and you got to choose whether to run or engage the situation, you cannot be thinking, because there's just so much happening so quickly that to consciously have thoughts about it would be detrimental to your overall survival. Right. That's sort of the pain avoidance sort of thing of like, is it going to be less pain to turn around and run, or less pain to stand up and fight whatever is happening around me? And if you delegated that sort of processing to a frontal brain or a neocortex, then you might end up not being able to
get punched in the face.
And nobody wants to get punched in the face, at least.
No, definitely not.
It's usually not an enjoyable experience. I mean, there's some exceptions, right, with that brain and finding a mate.
Well, yeah, I probably shouldn't ask this question. Never mind.
What?
No, it just reminded me of the first time I got legit punched in the face. I know people are probably assuming something, but I actually took Muay Thai. And we were sparring, and I remember it was like this, I don't know, like I was not well paired, and I was sparring with this guy, and he decked me really good, and I just gasped like you
Mhm.
hit me as if we weren't like fighting with each other. He felt so bad. And then it was really funny because like something snapped. And before I could even process how like offended I was that I just got punched in the face, I just like went after him and the poor guy. So it was a good sparring match. We were pretty even matched. But I'm just laughing because that was a funny story. Thought I'd share it.
Everyone has a plan until they get hit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I sparred with Nick once too, actually. Remember we had we had little
Oh, yeah.
headgears and we had like pads and everything. But he
Mhm.
kept bopping me on the head like a bunny rabbit or something. And so I was just like, sweep the leg. And I started kicking him and it was fun.
Yes, just kick me in the same spot in the leg over and over again.
The Muay Thai
Yeah,
move.
it's
Eventually they
It
buckle.
was
Yeah.
it was pretty effective. I got pretty sore after a while. It was not
Especially
comfortable.
Especially if it's that, that leg where you load up all your energy on for your punch.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah, of
punches have no
course.
power.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Just
Well, and
tactically
these shins, man, they're calcified.
Oh,
Give me
boy.
like just 1 year of Muay Thai.
But
yeah. What are you gonna say, Nick?
no, I was just gonna say because I wanted to, I wanted to kind of double back to Ayla's points about this, like the brain's inability to register threat, appropriately or proportionally, I should say.
Mhm.
And I think that's an interesting thing because, it is something that we haven't really evolved into yet, and that possibly could be something that we do evolve into, but there is still our like little mammalian brain, our proto-human brains are still trying to constantly detect threat. And I do think that there is something interesting about the fact that we can't really proportionalize threat, or at least our body's response to it. Yeah, so I think that's
Well, like,
that's gets in a little bit to how that system might be able to be hacked.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. Sorry, what were you gonna say, Mike?
Mhm.
I was just gonna draw parallels to like because we had a conversation a long time ago where it's like when men walk into the room, we size up everyone.
Oh,
Like I
right.
could
Yeah.
beat up that guy, that guy,
Yeah.
that guy.
Yeah.
Women, I think Ayla, you were saying that like when you walk in, you're like, well, I look better than her. Oh, she looks cuter than me in that dress. So
Okay,
it's like,
I must have been 2 drinks in when I said that because that sounds so bitchy.
Girls
do
won't
not.
admit that, but
yeah, but
Do I
it's that threat
now, like-
detention, right?
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
same sort of thing, but
Absolutely.
based within this reptilian kind of brain of either like finding a mate or a threat. And so, like, I wonder if we do something similar. If you have like 800 emails and you're like scrolling through them, you're like, all right, which one of these emails are going to screw me over the most?
Yeah. You got to do damage assessment for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part because it just builds where you're like, okay, that's a to do, that's a to do, that's a to do. And you're like, okay, none of these are urgent, but they all should be done soon. And there's so much volume of emails. No.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's something very very powerful to the fact that we can't distinguish between a lion chasing us and being swamped at work.
Right.
Like,
And
and
it's okay.
yeah. No, go ahead.
Well, okay. I don't know if you're like saying that to move on to another topic. If we're going to stay on this topic, then please.
No.
Okay.
I was just saying it to say it.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No,
I
that's
was
good.
just thinking there's a book. It's called what? Okay, I don't know if it's called Burnout or if it's Burnout is just like a decorative design because it's repeated 6 times on the cover. You could probably guess why I bought it, but it's called The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And what's cool about it is that they really get into the science. And one of the things they were talking about was this nervous system, like arousal. So that stress when you think you're getting like murdered or something like that, and it's just an email. She said that there's a stress cycle, and that what happens is that to complete the cycle, you need to have that moment when, like a gazelle, you burst and ran away,
Mm.
or you kicked
An
your
expenditure of energy.
Exactly. And there
Mhm.
are ways, there's more science coming out to find out like alternatives to biohacking your brain so that it thinks that the cycle was completed. But one of the most effective things you can do when there's that like keyed up nature is to just like, move your body, go for a run, get those like endorphins going. Cause essentially it's just all this adrenaline that just course through your body.
Mm.
And then if it has nowhere to go, it's like, imagine it's like, does the lion see me? And you're just staring there like scared. Like, and the more
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to happen, the more you're terrified. And this is all happening in the background of your subconscious. And like, yeah, so
just shake your leg. That's
shake
what
your
I
leg.
do. Yeah.
I'm a little bit worried about the like using the gazelle thing because we're predators, right? That's why our eyes point forward and they're not like off to the side because we hunt. We're the lions, not the lions hunt us, sort of thing. So I wonder if you get into some strange stress, some prey stress cycle by repeating that sort of like it almost sounds like you're running away from the issue because the new email hits, it adds the level, at least. So I use myself for an example. So like if a new email hits me and it's for a job interview or something, because I deal with social anxiety all the time. So I have this new level of stress that hits me. My cortisol levels jack up, and I have to respond to it either now or later. And I know if I don't respond to it in the moment, it's just going to eat away in my head, and it's going to have that adrenaline. Your adrenaline cores don't get exhausted, but it's going to make me spend more time focusing on that one subject, I guess. So there's like almost the thing where like when I respond, that's when I get that nice stress endorphin release. Like I just worry that like stepping outside and running or doing something else is like a distraction from the problem, and then it becomes a bit more of a subconscious thing.
Yeah, I think it could be like you could answer the email, but you should still try to run. You don't have to run. Like they say, like you could kind of like Nick said, you could like shake your leg. But there's other ways to simulate the benefits of a long run. So like even if you just take a minute, breathe in and then exhale longer than your inhale and do that a couple times, what that's telling your body, oh wait, we're calm now. Oh, we're calm. We can stop pumping the adrenaline. Like, okay, I guess we're safe. We're safe. We're doing good. And then like that all down regulates everything, which is really good. And you can do it whenever is most expedient for you in your life. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about it in terms of like, okay, when I get really stressed out, let me just like go outside in the sunshine and like breathe for a little bit or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and running to predators chase. So you don't necessarily have to be running away from something. You could be running towards it as well.
I
But
do think it's interesting though about like the eyes forward, the predator mindset. Like we're not just
Binocular vision.
gazelles. Yeah, I'm wondering because I'm like trying to think back. I did get to hear this professor speak, and very entertaining. I feel like he addressed it, but I don't remember for sure.
Well, Mike kind of touched on a little bit of my next sort of question because the other part of this reptilian complex has something to do with focus and motivation, and I think that the metaphor of hunter or prey is pretty applicable to that because I was wondering in which ways do motivation and focus sort of live in the subconscious level? And I think that illustration of, being laser focused like a predator would be is a pretty good illustration. So I don't know if I necessarily have to ask that question, but do you guys have anything that you'd like to add on top of it?
Yeah, well, I think like maybe in some ways that hyper focus is part of like a fight response, like if I just pay close attention, you're kind of, yeah, like you're fulfilling that a little bit. Was that what you just said?
No. Yeah, I mean it's similar. It's basically what I was saying is that when we were talking about the illustration of hunter and prey, and my question was like, in what ways do motivation and focus sort of live on the subconscious level? And that kind of answered the question to me, at least in my mind. It's a good illustration. Like if you're going after something, like say Mike is working on a chain of code and he's just deep in the focus. It's like a predator, stalking their prey. That's that same level of focus. It is. It's,
Yeah.
it's that same level of focus that's being applied, same sort of energy that's being applied. So I just think that that's a really kind of cool illustration as to how those things are similar.
Right, right. I'm getting all these like weird stories in my head. So when you mentioned the stalking bit, I had this image of Mike like on his computer, like, I'm gonna get this code. I'm coming for the code.
Yeah.
Get you.
There's a little bit of it, like you
Like trash talking the code.
well, like you come up with a plan for it, right? And if you're a student of, there's a computer scientist named Dijkstra that's prolific within our study, and he always made it clear that you should write your code down before you type it out, and it doesn't have to be in the language that you're coding in. It could be in this thing called pseudocode, which is like a nice medium between not machine readable would be the too technical term, between code that you program with and just pure English of like, I take the number from the website and put it into the list, but even technically that's still pseudocode. But anyways, so it's like you come up with a hunting plan and then you execute that hunting plan through typing it out. So it is there are now like it is a little bit like that, where like you're not trash talking it, but you get into that mindset again of hunting down the problem. Even just problem definition too. When you don't know exactly the best way to approach the problem, there's a bit of kind of hunting and stalking it down. But I can say from experience that there is a difference between, say, writing code for yourself, like in an entrepreneurial sense of the word, and maybe this is abstracts out to just tasks as well, so you guys can comment and see if you agree. So there's a difference between that and then coding for somebody else's business, where I have felt like the prey, where I have used that hyper focus. It's the same energy,
right?
But you feel more like the prey, like you're focused on the predator chasing you and you have to escape. So you're kind of coming up with this plan to get away really quickly. Whereas taking your time and very slowly approaching and eventually solving the problem, whatever it is in the business sense.
Right. Much more meticulously than frantically, I would say.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever come across that?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about is like a narrative shift, because so much of it comes down to the stories that we tell ourselves, I think. And so I could have a day where I'm really feeling the squeeze of email palooza. And then I can just stop and be like, okay, well, let's take a breath. Let's, am I hungry? Am I tired? Should I get some coffee? Okay, let's improve my environment, make it relaxing, put some calm music on. And then I reframe it and it's like, okay, well, this isn't me reacting to like all these emails. This is actually a human that is communicating with me, and somebody saw my inbox once and they were like, oh, you're so popular. And I was like, okay, this is going to sound really like lame, but if you frame it as like, these are just little friends that are emailing me, then it's like much easier to be like, oh, another friend. I don't know if that's just like lying to yourself, but at the same time, like at the end of the day, if I've emailed 100 friends, I feel a lot better than if I just like frantically responded to like 100 threats, So I think reminding your brain like it's okay, it's just an email really goes a long way.
Well, and I think that there, I have kind of felt this sort of thing a little bit in small doses. If I'm working on a project, say in my garage, and it's just for me, like right now, working on something just for me, I have no need to meet deadlines. I'm kind of just sort of figuring this out. I'm taking my time. It's something I've never done before, so I'm trying to make sure that I do it really well. But if I'm doing something for somebody else, I need to make sure that that thing is done by this date. And so that becomes a lot more finite, and I don't have the room to sort of, like you said, evaluate your sort not necessarily threat, but you're sort of like prey, and get the logistics done. I have to be more about the time and the time sensitivity and doing things safer. So like I won't take a certain risk. If I have a project that I need to do for a client, I won't take a risk in that project. I won't do something I haven't done before. I want to make sure that I do something that I've done at least, half a dozen times, a dozen times, a million times, whatever, so that the variability for me to messing it up, which happens quite a lot, it just shrinks down a little bit because I won't have the time to remake something if I screw it up. So yeah, I definitely understand that sort of perspective for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think it plays in that lizard brain like quite a bit. Like either from seeing it as 100 friends, versus 100 threats, or just like I can't mess up this project for this client. Yeah.
And keeping it safe, like a prey animal will keep it safe. They'll go to the same spots that they always go to. They graze in the same spots they always graze at. Like they're very methodical. They have a couple bites of their ground food and they pop their head up and look around. So it's like they're very meticulous in making sure that they're cautious. And I think that that's kind of like what I do when I know that I have to produce something for somebody, like I want to be very careful about the product that I give them. Yeah.
And it's so funny because like I'm kind of the opposite in the sense that the more I try at something, the more I fail. Like I don't know what it is, but if I try really hard, I just make so many mistakes. I just get like if I get too in my head about something, it's over. But like if I can just really calm things down and be like, it's not a big deal. You're just doing this little thing. You're just doing this thing, this other thing.
And sometimes you just have to do it and fail and fail and fail and fail and fail and fail. And then one day you'll be like, oh, I did it right this time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's true. It's funny like you mentioned like with clients and stuff, because I had a client recently that hired me to do a couple things that weren't exactly in my wheelhouse. And I was very upfront. I was like, look, I'm going to charge about half as much as what somebody would charge who does this all the time. And full disclosure, you might hate it. If you hate it, don't pay me. I'm just learning, right? This is me learning something new. If you love it, I'll half the hours and there you go. And so actually worked out really well. They loved it. And then they paid me my full rate. So like sometimes things work out that way too. But whatever kind of works for your workflow, like I think is the way to go. Because I know some people, they can't do anything unless there's like a time deadline hounding them. And I can't, I don't know. I feel like those are Leos or something.
Well, they thrive under the crunch time, for sure. I can get that.
I used to be like that. I think it's like the drama or something.
Well, it's also a young person's game. So
anyway, sleep.
Sometimes to just like two different things. There's like the thing of like Wu Wei, where like you just don't try, you just sort of do. And then since we're talking about animals, sometimes I just like to embody the honey badger.
Nice.
Honey badger don't care.
That's
honey
right.
badger do whatever it wants.
Oh,
does
man.
do whatever it wants.
Yeah, honey badger be honey badgering.
Yeah.
I remember my honey badger phase. It's a good time.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's all to sort of suggest that there is sort of two modalities, at least, in which you can sort of access that primordial focus or motivation, whether it's from the sort of methodic and cautious prey aspect or sort of the logistical, tactical predator aspect. Yeah. But yeah, so I wanted to ask some more questions since we're on a roll, and then I wanted to get into just two sort of representations in mythology, which is very brief. The rest is kind of all brief, but at the end I have this little article about how, and it's from Neuroscience Marketing, how to basically market to the lizard brain, which I think will be quite interesting. But so we've kind of gone over what the lizard brain means and how it factors into society and stuff like that, and how even in the workplace. But do you think that we sort of do you think that we purposely cater to, or that maybe that's kind of like a front-loaded question. Here's my question. Do you think that we cater in our society to the lizard brain? And if so, Do you think that that's just an inevitability?
You mean like in the sense that, okay, so going back to the list of lizard brain things, that's pain avoidance, breathing
Mhm.
regulation, maybe not that, but
Impulsiveness, like the self-preservation, drive for reproduction, impulsive
yeah,
decision making.
I mean, I think, okay, this is, well, that is a loaded question. I
It
mean,
is
there
a
is a
loaded
lot
question.
that could
I
go
know.
into it. And
Yes.
my brain went to the weirdest place. So
That's
like
cool.
so like the reproduction need of the lizard brain, giggity. So, so it's like a tick or something. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So like I always thought this about like taxes and deficits. And I always thought like, well, how can you allow a deficit to run if you, well, I mean, I guess basically in the sense that like the way it's all set up from like a tax perspective, because taxes are coming up, it's the society is saying, yeah, we're going to keep having people, and then like we're just going to have more people, and they're going to help take care of things in the future. So I think that that kind of like reliance on just this is the way things are, that might be
Mhm.
kind of one of the things that came to mind. And I
Yeah.
need to do my taxes.
Do you see that as like that seems to me as it would be an inevitability because propagation of the species is pretty paramount to existence, no? I mean, so it doesn't seem like we could. I mean, like my question, I guess, is: do you think that there's a society in which we don't need to sort of cater to these things?
Nope.
No. All right.
Hey,
Cool.
I don't know. I'm
I
drawing a
have
blank. No, I'm trying.
no, I do have a thing. I was just gonna see if Ayla, you were done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
no. I mean, I guess you're right. I don't know.
No. I don't need to be right. I'm just go for it. Go
There
for
was
it,
a
Mike.
nuance there that escapes me, so I shall return to it when I am
So-
smarter.
Okay. Got it. You'll circle back. All right.
Yes.
Leave her alone.
Yeah,
Leave it
man.
alone. As much as we are instinctually driven to that as individuals, we are driven to that as a society. And the only way to kind of get out of that is through self-awareness, as on the individual level and on the societal level. Because you can look at things like Twitter, where all it is lizard brain all
Yeah.
day, lizard
yeah.
brain all night, and it's this feedback loop of emotion and anger and things like that. But you can also look at it as like the need to make money. I almost would say is a lizard brain sort of thing in a hyper capitalistic sense. Like when that is you're only in single focus, it has come down to like you're just reproducing money over and over and over, and then that can be damaging as well.
Yeah, well,
Society.
it's an adaptation of self-preservation as well, right? It's like,
Correct.
even if Bezos has more money than anybody will ever need for 10, 20 lifetimes, it doesn't feel like enough because that self-preservation mechanism is still being like, you need more. Like,
And more.
Yeah.
You're right. Like, and that will always be there. That will always feed
Yeah.
itself. So, like, yeah. I mean, I think we can get out of it, but as a society, we need to become more aware of that sort of stuff.
We also
Personally,
need.
yeah.
I was gonna say we also need a T-shirt of the little crisscross lizard that's got his arms crossed and it says "Lizard Brain all day."
Just say, let's get limbic.
Oh my god.
Or let's get sub-limbic.
Nerdy.
10 out of 10. I approve.
Yeah. Nice.
Call up the printing presses.
Yeah.
Good done.
For sure.
Yes.
Well, and that kind of dovetails into my next question, because if there is this sort of place in which we don't need to cater to our sort of lizard brain and baser functions, that kind of questions is that would that be a place where in which pain avoidance is unnecessary? And then if that were to be possible, is that even a place that we want to live in? I mean,
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm smart again. I got this.
Okay.
So
Let's do it.
Okay. I don't remember where I first heard about this. It might have been this really cool documentary, I Am, that I saw years ago. It's a little bit like hippy dippy. And if any of the people are now engaged in activities that make them bad by association, I apologize. But the movie itself was pretty interesting. And the kind of the idea was hinging on how so much of today is based on concepts of competition as opposed to cooperation. And I think that gets into like that, back to that height, that idea. Like, do you believe that the world is a good place, or do you think it's fraught with danger? And are your assumptions based on your lived experiences or aggregate experiences? Is there an actual truth to that, or is it entirely subjective? We don't know. And you can look to the natural world and people would say, oh, well, it's, you have like the food pyramid and competition for resources and things like that. But then you can look at the nature world. Actually, it's this complex ecosystem where everything's kind of feeding into itself and it's really beautiful. And there really isn't scarcity and this and that. So take that how you will. But I just thought that was kind of something that made me think.
Well, I wonder if that's
when you asked that.
Yeah. No, I think that's an appropriate answer and really interesting. I kind of wonder if that's a more of like a collectivist mindset in a way, because it would assume that in nature the modus operandi of every animal isn't self-preservation. It would assume that there's like, because the rabbit's running away from the fox, not to give the fox a nice jog before it gets eaten. It's doing it to preserve its own self and not necessarily like for the larger ecosystem.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's it just seems to me that you would have to give up the need for self-preservation in order to sort of get to that point, maybe.
So I think it just kind of goes off of perspective. So let's say you're in Yellowstone and you're a deer and you're doing deer things. And then all of a sudden these humans are like, oh, let's repopulate the wolf population. You're like, no, there's wolves here and they ate Jimmy. And like, this is not good. But then, over the course of a year, there's more rivers, there's more plentiful food. Your herd of deer has grown in size.
But Jimmy never comes back.
Yes.
Is it worth Jimmy's life?
That was last week's episode, wasn't it? I'm just saying though, like it does kind of become a matter of perspective, and I think this is why I always talk about truth existing in a closed system. If you look just at Jimmy, that's not a good thing. If you widen that, system and you look at the larger perspective, it is a good thing. And so then it's like, well, who gets to label it a good thing? I don't know, but
it gets into a whole
can both
thing.
exist. Yeah. And then too, it gets back at like competition versus cooperation, I don't know. I mean, like Jimmy might be gone, but now we have more rabbits and beavers and I don't know what other things wolves eat, but
but
like it gets really plentiful.
Yeah, but I think my only counterpoint to that is Jimmy wouldn't sacrifice himself for that.
Well, you know what? Jimmy had his chance. There was a whole herd of deer. He was the one not paying attention. You said you chew 3 times and you look up, and this little jerk ate 4 times, like little Bezos. No, I'm just kidding. He's trying to hoard all the grass, and I mean.
So, how do you feel about Bambi's mom, Ayla?
That's a whole other story. That was a hunter that probably didn't even eat his mom. Was Bambi? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I do. Yeah, that scene was tragic. Why? Yeah, poor Bambi.
But from a wider ecological system, I'm sure.
Disney made a lot of money off of that scene.
Yeah, that's right. So Bambi's mom needed to die.
Had a really cute shirt, had flour on it. Bambi wouldn't have met flour if the mom had lived.
Well, and so this is kind of like getting to something that I'm like kind of just sort of tangentially touching upon, which is this sort of like built into the cake self-interest that humans have, and perhaps trying to force that out, force that into extinction socially isn't going to work. I think that's kind of what I'm alluding to a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, that's all.
Oh, that's all. Yeah.
like I think you definitely need like both. Like it's good to sacrifice yourself to understand the value of not sacrificing yourself. And we have the luxury of doing that when it doesn't come down to physical consequences.
Hmm.
Um, but just like to put it in the reproductive sense, it it's definitely good to have dry spells to appreciate it when it rains, and it's good to have
Hmm.
dry spells to, or I'm sorry, it's good to have rainy days to appreciate when it's dry, or vice versa. So
I don't
you.
appreciate the entendre here, but yeah, I get you.
Nick, you took the words right out of my mouth.
But you go back and forth, you vacillate, you oscillate, and it's
Gotcha.
you need both.
Yeah, no, I
And
agree
that's how
with
you evolve past the whole fucking
you. Right.
I just like the way you word it. I don't appreciate it. You're cute, Nick.
Well, yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that it doesn't necessarily needs to be a balance, and for sure, I just, like I think that there's still ultimately this, this side of us that wants to make sure that we're alive. So I think humans are willing to lay themselves down on the line, and they've proven to do that when they're trying to save the greater good, which I think is beautiful. But I also don't necessarily think that we can remove the self-interest, because even and this gets into the weeds of whether there is truly a selfless act in the world, but like even the most selfless of acts can be fulfilling internally. So I don't know.
Egoism versus altruism, and
Yeah,
well, but that's also from an outsider's perspective, right? Because
it
sometimes
is.
like you can get into like the Srinyata point of view of it, where it's like a deed or an action is just an action. Like once the objective visible thing is done, anything eternal is like sort of subjective, and
Mhm.
unless you're in that actual event, you may not even get a feeling of fulfillment.
Right.
It could just be a thing that sort of happens, or you may not get a feeling of disappointment. Like it could just be a thing that happens.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree for sure. Let's see. I want to move along just a little bit into the mythological stuff. I'm going to shorten this a little bit because we're running close on time as it is, and I definitely want to get into the way we are our lizard brains are marketed to. But I was trying to figure out and trying to find some sort of representations of these concepts of this reptilian structure, this self-preservation, this reproduction, this sort of impulsiveness, how that sort of manifests itself in mythology. And I really got to say, I need to find some more mythology from other cultures, because I cannot get away from this Greek mythology. And I was basically pointed to the Greek gods too, because I think that this sort of complex represents a destructive and reproductive or productive side to it. So I chose that the gods Ares and the gods Eros, which are the gods of war and love. And there's a lot to kind of support that they embody this sort of lizard brain, sublimbic system. Ares, being the god of war, was incredibly a very impulsive and abrasive sort of god that most of the Olympians actually hated. Go figure, right? They didn't like war, but they didn't mind watching men, go to war. And then conversely, you had somebody like Eros, who was actually really loved and revered and considered purity and truth incarnate. And so I just thought that was an interesting juxtaposition, the way that seemingly the embodiment of self impulse and in many ways self-preservation, and then also a different embodiment of self-preservation and the drive to reproduction in Eros were sort of like looked at in two different ways. And there's this quote by Zeus when he speaks to Ares that I have for you, and it's this is after Ares comes back from the battle in the Iliad, I believe. and he's all beaten up and he's complaining, and Zeus has none of his stuff. He's basically saying, he says, and I quote, "To me you are the most hateful of all the gods who hold Olympus. Forever quarreling is dear to your heart, wars and battles, and yet I will not long endure to see you in pain, since you are my child, and it was to me that your mother bore you. But you were born of some other god and proved so ruinous. Long since you have been dropped beneath the gods of the bright sky." And I just thought that last little line was interesting because, as a representation of the sort of lower brain, Ares being looked upon as a lower god compared to the other Olympians, I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know. That seems like I'm connecting dots that aren't there. I just thought it was a nice little coincidence. And let's see. Oh, there's this one little legend of Ares that I wanted to talk about. And it's leads me to a question for you guys, but it's just there's a myth about Ares being captured by giants, and the giants hold him and they throw him into a brass urn in which he stays for 3 months. In this 3 months, basically all of Earth is like peaceful and idyllic, and the gods are kind of like wondering what's going on. Hermes, the messenger of God, figures out that Ares has been captured. He goes and rescues him, sets Ares free, and slays the giants that freed him, or that imprisoned Ares. And I thought that was kind of strange because the outlook on Ares amongst the Olympians is one of such disdain. I wonder if there's sort of like this metaphor in the fact that the gods couldn't let him be imprisoned. Do you know what I mean? Like, why save Ares?
Well, I think if you're a god, you want people to pray to you, and people usually do that under duress. So I think they're just petty.
Just petty?
Just petty.
Yeah.
There's no entertainment now. It's all peaceful. Peace
Right.
isn't entertaining. You gotta have some conflict, some struggle. You know, maybe some underdogs take out, the David and Goliath type stories. And without Ares, obviously that didn't go. But I think there's a hierarchy within the pantheon, which would make Ares the lesser god, right, or the lower god in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But they could have just also had personal beefs with Ares. They just might have not liked the notion of war, but seen it as a necessary evil, and maybe a world of peace is not what it's all cracked up to be.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's true. Imagine if, like, for better or for worse, imagine if Eden continued to exist, right? If humans, according to biblical mythology, is, if humans weren't cast out of Eden, would there be a story of humanity? I mean, I don't know. We'd all just be hanging out naked, eating figs.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any technology. We wouldn't be able to do this podcast.
No podcast for sure. Yeah. We would, maybe have some pea pods and talk, but
we could
no
probably
podcast.
have like designer leaves.
Yeah.
Do you have the latest leather leaf? These groin leaves are completely designed for your cushion, or no.
Someone would be like, "Where'd you learn to design that leaf?"
Yeah.
And then they'd be like, we have a divergent attitude. Get them out of here."
Yep. Kick them out.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true though, because like you can't. Okay, so like I was thinking about this because I want to read Utopia by who wrote that? Gosh, I had it in my head a minute ago. But anyway, y'all know what I'm talking about. So there's this book, and the reason I want to read it is because I think it's so interesting. More?
Marx?
No,
More
it's
Marx?
More Marx.
No.
Oh, it's more.
Oh.
No. Utopia book. It's a book? It's a book.
Old book.
What's
But
a
it's-
book?
What's a book? Thomas More, right?
It is
Thomas
Thomas
Line
More. Yeah.
Yeah.
Un libro. Yeah, no, but so what was my point? Oh, okay. So if this like Eden world or whatever, well, then like, can you have humans existing peacefully
Hmm.
and still have the full range of human emotion?
Right.
That
And-
and that's something I was like kind of thinking about, like, oh, because yeah, I mean, like I've watched
And
Inside
if
Out.
Christian
Oh.
Bale's equilibrium has taught us anything, that is no, you can't.
Puppies.
Puppies. I would say
Everything
no.
will be gray, and you'll learn how to do gun katas, and you'll wear trench coats, and there'll be no music.
Well, can we keep
That's
the
an
gun
interesting
katas
film, though.
and
Yes.
trench coats?
Yes.
Dude, you need to play Beat Saber. That's
Yeah.
like kind of the same thing.
But yeah, yeah, you guys got anything else on that?
Oh, just that.
I was just thinking like free will is divine and to be human is to be dual, like to have that light and dark nature. So you
Mhm.
need some of that warlike thing in you. You need to be, a predator and I guess sometimes a prey. You need both attitudes in there. And that
Mhm.
lizard brain function, and like if you got rid of that completely and you just had this la-di-da type thing in a utopia, I don't even think you would have any motivation to do anything.
Yeah, there would be no catalyst for change. That's for
Mhm.
sure. There would be no need for change.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah, like, if we were never hot, we would have never invented the air conditioner.
We wouldn't have burnt or discovered fire. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
if we were never
cold if we were
cold.
never cold. Yeah. Never
Yeah.
hot. Yeah. Let me
Which
start
is
the fire. I'm getting really warm in here.
Yeah, and it's like one of my favorite things in the world is to catch myself when I am immediately aware of a tiny inconvenience. So like Nick, you have one, which is when you accidentally drop something in the space between your car chair and like the center console.
Mhm.
It just goes down there, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
And then I like to reflect on that and try to find out if somebody's already solved that issue. And I think this is like the emergence of all those life hack articles on like BuzzFeed and stuff like that. That was probably one of like my favorite, like the first life hack article I ever read. I was like, oh, my people. Because you have folks figuring
Living can
out.
be slightly easier.
Dude, but it can totally be like, you put a clip here or you put a motion sensor light over here. It's like the smallest little thing, but by golly,
Oh,
once you make that improvement, you can't go back.
yeah. All right. Well, I think let's see. I want to wrap up with the ways that this proven to be inaccurate description of the lizard brain is actually well known and very commonplace in the vernacular of marketing. So the lizard brain may not be in the scientific community, but it is very much alive in the marketing world. In the marketing world, the lizard brain refers to a similar human traits such as self-preservation instinct, the drive to reproduce. And there is a whole litany of ways in which the marketing world can cater to that lizard brain to make you buy things or make you think things or anything, basically. And I wanted to really kind of take this episode as a sort of springboard into a future episode I want to do about marketing and propaganda, because I think that once we understand a little bit what the lizard brain is doing, we understand how they market to it and how they speak to it, that's when you can kind of start to see, oh, this stuff is all over the place. There's marketing in everything. And sometimes that's useful to know because sometimes you don't need to buy the thing that was blasted at you subconsciously in some commercial, and sometimes it's not necessarily to buy that thing and you'd be able to discern between those things. But this article comes from Neuroscience Marketing. And if I can open it, it says it's called the reptilian brain and 7 ways to engage your customer's reptilian brain. That already makes me my skin crawl a little bit. But it lists these 7 ways in which to kind of do this. And so I'm just going to read these off to you and give you like a little excerpt of what they say, like how to utilize this. So the first one is to speak to the pain of your audience. So what you want to do is tap into exactly what the pain point of your consumer is. And then in your value proposition, make sure that you have an incorporated way on how you plan to alleviate the pain. Obviously, since the lizard brain is in charge of pain avoidance, if they say, like the Volvo is now the most safe car for your children, that's that speaking to the pain of your audience. The concept that your children, you don't want your children to die in a car crash, do you? You don't have to say it eventually, out the gate. You can say, we have the safest cars. We have the safest cars for families. And that sort of piques the lizard brain into thinking, okay, well, I need safety. Something could happen in my car. I don't want that to happen. That could cause pain. So speaking to the pain of your audience is definitely a big one. The next one they have here is to appeal to the reptilian's brain of self-centered nature. So just basically appealing to the person, using words like you, and provide pictures from the consumer's perspective, being able to relate, mirroring the person's mannerisms, all of these little things that you can appeal to sort of like bolster the person, make them feel good about themselves, make them feel like they're making the right decision when they're buying this thing. This all appeals to the lower brain. The second, let's see. This one is kind of interesting. It's the importance of demonstration through demonstrating importance through contrast. And this one actually has like a little example. Do you guys remember the "I'm a PC, I'm a Mac" commercials?
No.
I think everybody kind of remembers those. They used to be a big meme, and it was on TV. It was like this dorky, stuffy white guy with glasses, and he would wear like long black tube socks, and he'd be like, "I'm a PC." And then you had Justin Long, who was like the cool young hip guy who wore a button-down shirt but was never tucked in, and he was wearing like jeans, and he's like, "I'm a Mac."
That's so mean. Oh my god.
Yeah, and then they would go through these commercials where the PC is like obviously dorky and he can't do anything right, and the Mac guy's super cool and like he's young and he's vibrant. So this is
2 games.
Yeah. This is the sort of like illustration of contrast that really appeals to our lizard brain. We'd like to see that this is the thing you want, this is the thing you don't want, this is the good thing, this is the bad thing. And so with that representation of being the PC, very drab, very boring, very stuffy, and then the Mac being this young, cool, hip guy that doesn't follow the rules as an innovator, it creates that sort of contrast in your mind that makes you want to buy the product. Yep. Well, and they do that with Pepsi and Coca-Cola too. Well, that's why they're red and blue.
Oh, wow.
Coca-Cola does it to Coca-Cola. They're like, now it's real sugar. And you're like, well, what was in the other Coke? I don't understand.
Let's see. The next one is showing value tangibility. And that is basically you assume that your customer will be skeptical in your claims and that they need to prove, you need to prove it to them by proving evidence. So kind of expecting that the customer is going to be skeptical about your sales pitch and then making sure that you have the provability of whatever anticipated skepticism that they have. So like that reminds me of that classic line where they're doing like an infomercial and be like, but does it chop carrots? And it's like, oh, not only does it chop carrots, it minces them very finely. I'm thinking like a slap chop or something, like what about these really thick carrots? Oh, it'll take care of them in a jiffy.
You ever see the Magic Bullet infomercial?
I love that infomercial. I used to watch that for fun.
Yeah, same here.
So weird. What?
There was this Australian just like hour-long infomercial about friends at breakfast using the magic bullet.
But it's so good.
It is really good.
Oh, you need to link that. I'll watch it.
It is very good.
Like they just all come over and bring stuff to chop up, or
there's like a party the night before at the house, and then in the morning, because I just remember one of the guys was like, "Oh, I'm so hungover," and then like, well, the magic bullet makes margaritas, or like makes like something
Bloody Marys or
Bloody
something.
Marys, yeah. But it's just this never-ending thing of like all the different dishes it can make, and you're like slowly pulled into the narrative, and then you pulled into like, huh, I may actually want one of these things.
I totally wanted one of those. It worked on me. I'm like, I could have friends that hang out with me. That would be amazing.
In reality, it's just like me by myself, like pretending I'm my own friend.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
More finely minced onions, Mike. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
One Mike wears a hat, the other Mike doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't understand how like during the whole like quarantine there haven't been like threads of Wilson where like people just buy soccer balls and they're like, here is my new companion.
That's been a thing for sure. Yeah.
It has to be, I would imagine.
Missed opportunity.
Very missed. So the next sort of rule here is don't strive for impact in the middle. You got to focus on the beginning and end. This is kind of like alluding to the short attention span that the reptilian brain allegedly has, and that what? Can you not hear me?
No. That was I was illustrating your point.
Oh, that was good. Thank you. I went over my head. That shows you how big my reptilian brain is.
No, I'm sorry. You were focused.
That's all right. Yeah, but it's just the concept that like, the stuff in the middle isn't what the subconscious is really going to dwell on. It's really going to pay attention at the beginning and the end of events, which kind of makes sense. Like, you think about how people say that, like under a traumatic event, they black out, right? They only remember, right before it happens. And then right after, they come back to, whether that's a fight. I've heard many people talk about, getting into fights where they don't even really kind of remember what happened in the fight. They remember the beginning and the end. Traumatic incidents like that, you just tend to absorb subconsciously the beginning and the end.
Oh, well, it makes sense for some movies I've seen in the past 5 years.
That's what I look like. Yeah, that's all they care about anyways.
How do we traumatize our audience real fast?
Yeah. Give them really terrible middle or beginning and end, and then just make the middle blah. They'll forget it immediately. The next thing to do is use visual metaphors, which is pretty self-explanatory. Painting a picture for people tends to win them over and make them more open to your suggestion. So that's, like you can see that in sales pitches, right? Or where the car, I can think of like the car salesman's talking to the family about, hitting the open road with the dog and the kids and going to see the Grand Canyon and taking your kids, camping for the first time, building that sort of image in the customer's head in order to sell them on the product.
And if it's not a Volvo, you're going to crash it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. You'll die.
Yeah.
The next is to strike an emotional chord. That again is also pretty self-explanatory. I like to think of it as the Sarah McLachlan commercials, the Arms of the Angels puppy murder commercials. Heartbreaking.
It
And
is.
we see a lot of that in our TV, is that play to emotion. And Ayla and I have been binging really bad junk food TV for the past couple months, and like it's so funny because it's like every episode has to make you cry. And like every episode has to make you really, really happy. It's so funny because it's like getting like smack, like it's like little episodes of
Dopamine hits.
heroin. Like,
That's true though, because you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, that just happened. And you're all teary eyed. You look over and he's teary eyed, and you're just like,
yeah,
ah. And then like the next 5 minutes go
every
by.
episode.
Yeah. And then everybody's like, yay. And you're like, oh my God, the thing happened. They have redemption. And you're like, yay. It's this roller coaster. Woo.
That's not to get too rhetorically nerdy on you. That's like a appeal to emotion, like a pathos, like pure pathos argument.
Mhm.
So like in a grocery store, there's a kid crying because the kid doesn't wants a candy bar. The kid just starts crying and starts acting classically pathetic. Not like you're pathetic, get out of here, but pathetic in the sense of being overly emotional. That's the argument, and then it compounds with this ethical or this ethos argument of like all the people looking at the parent and being like, why aren't you behaving like a parent? Why aren't you getting the thing that your kid wants? Because that's how we think or you think that we think the parent should behave. So like those, when marketers do that, they're also operating on that ethos of like, we know what you want.
Yes.
We are
Yes.
the advertiser.
Yeah, we're the answer.
And then they inject you with that pathos, that pathetic argument of like, here's your emotion.
Here's that feeling that you wanted. Now, if you buy the product, you can have that times a million.
Yeah, right. It's crazy.
It is pretty crazy, but that was basically the end of it. I didn't realize that. I should have said that was 7. But before we wrap up, there might be one more question that I thought would have been good. Oh yeah, that was one I wanted to ask you guys. What appeals to your lizard brain, like ad wise? Like what gets you, from an ad or a TV show or whatever? Like what really tickles your lizard brain?
Tickles your pickle. I'm a child. As I'm very much visually like motivated, so like usually like sex appeal will do it for me. It's that drive towards reproduction, where it's like you could be talking about any product, but you put someone in a bikini, I'm like, oh, what? Now all of a sudden I'm really interested in this product.
Right.
What? Gross, Mike. No,
yeah, I know, right? Men are pigs. Oh.
It's like the Carl's Jr. commercials.
Yeah. Oh my God, yes.
Commercials of the girls in bikinis eating burgers. Yeah.
They weren't even in bikinis. They just had red lipstick and like it was super high definition. And she just was taking forever to eat the burger. And like,
oh yeah, well one of them was like that. Yeah. Now they just call that a YouTube video.
Oh no, but then they found out that like the burger itself could be sexy. Have you seen the ones where they have slow-mo and they like drop the burger and like it falls and it's all bouncy and you see the lettuce do like a
Did you know that they use the same film production techniques that you would see in adult films? You also see in the Food Network and food advertising. They use the same thing because it's supposed to activate those lizard brain type things.
Are you saying that for those good juicy burgers I need to go to like Chatsworth or something like that? I'm in need of a good burger. Like sounds so good.
Carl's Jr.
Well, I'm just gonna sit here and drink this coffee.
What about you, Ayla? What appeals to your lizard brain ad wise?
Ad-wise, I would say it's probably the storytelling. The one where they show you like,
like Budweiser horse.
Yes. Or like, like alcohol is a great one, right? Like they'll have maybe not a Dos Equis, well, maybe not that. Okay, like the car one, for example. Like I have been wanting a Subaru since forever, and the Crosstrek specifically. So if any of you listening just wants to buy one, just holler at us, but that's probably very doubtful. So I will continue to want it. And what I do is like I'll see an ad for a Subaru, and then what happens is that the next time I'm somewhere similar to that, I think, oh, this would be so much better in a Subaru. Like, I think about how I could go snowboarding if I had a Subaru, or like I could go, on like the dunes of Pismo if I had a Subaru.
So creating that, that illustration, that metaphorical illustration of what you could be doing in the car if you had the car.
Yeah, dude, like I dream about like loading the car up for a weekend drive. Like, just want to load a car up.
Just work for Subaru. Be like a
Yeah,
model for
right.
Subaru or
There you
something,
go.
and then you'll get a free
Yeah.
one.
Start running their online stuff. There you go.
I learned this the hard way. I loved scuba, so I got like deep in the scuba game. And once it's your job, it gets tainted a little bit. So yeah, no. I'm gonna keep the Subaru separate. I shall acquire her one day.
Mm. Well, I think for me, it has to be any iPhone commercial.
They are good.
They're geniuses about it. It makes me want to buy an iPhone. Now I never would, but still, like every time I hear that, bam, 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 and then the phone's like moving around and all like glitchy moves, and it's all super close up, and it's colorful, and colors splashing everywhere. Yeah.
Nice.
People
That'll
living
do it.
their lives, taking
I'm a
photos.
5-year-old. I just need bright colors and and a good song.
Duly noted. You seen me next time, Mike? Like, whenever this is all done, and I'll be all popping like bright blues, bright pinks. You'd be like, whoa, crisscross and 90s are back. What's up? Next lizard brain.
That should be the colors for the shirt, and then we should
Yeah.
do like an
Ooh.
iPhone commercial, but for
Yeah.
the shirt.
Oh my
Right.
god, that sounds perfect. Let's get limbic. No.
Yeah. Well,
we need a good song for that too. We'll have to pick
Oh,
one.
yeah.
You could
It could
make
be
something.
Let's Get Physical by what's her name?
I want
What's
to
her
get.
name? Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, right.
Let's get limbical. I want to get limbical. All right. Well, now we're just getting weird.
Wait. What about get limbic, baby? Wait, what is
No.
it? That's
All right. Good night,
yeah.
everybody.
Oh
Thank you.
God, no, do this to me. Oh, it's like Ice Baby, except for
I think you're saying push it. No.
oh.
Anyways.
I think it's a mixture of the
Limbic.
two, and then
Wait,
that way we can get
A
away
whole
from
bunch of it,
all
yes.
of the copyright laws.
Yes, exactly.
So we just have to make our own song, mash up a couple of them. We'll figure it out. Don't worry.
Right. Yeah, but that's it. That's it for me, guys. Do you guys have anything that you want to add before we wrap up?
Sure. I have one question.
Please. Yes. Go.
So how would you feel if I said that everything that happens around you is a marketing scheme towards your lizard brain from the second you wake up to the second you go back to sleep?
I'd believe it whole cloth. Yeah. I know. I know that's the case.
From your alarm clock going off, trying to annoy
Pretty
you.
much the damn sound in my alarm clock is probably tailored and curated to activate my lizard brain.
Ayla?
Creepy. Well, I don't know. I mean, like defined by everything. Like if I go to my backyard, which I curated and it's just like plants and stuff, like is that like what do you
Is
mean?
it pretty? Does it remove pain from your daily life? Does it make you escape from the need to reply to emails?
Yes and no. I mean, it's got bees. Those are kind of scary. We had a big grasshopper. Those will jump on your face. There
She's
are
being
bugs,
confused. Yes.
thorns. So yes, it provides joy, but it is also not a safe place. It is just a tranquil place with tiny dangers.
Maybe those are trying to get you to get back to your emails.
Yeah, all the
I know,
bugs are trying to tell you to get back to work.
I mean, as somebody highly influenceable, I will concede that it's pretty. You can make a pretty good argument for a lot of things, and I'll be like, compelling. But I don't know. I mean,
so the root argument that I'm making is that everything around you is an argument, like a rhetorical position. Like everything's trying to convince you to do something, and for the most part, the best way to do is to hack into that lizard brain. But the more you become aware of these small things that are trying to nudge you and push you around, influence you, the better you are to resist it or let it in if you want.
Right.
wait. So, like, let's
filter
say Yeah, so let's say I leave like a bottle of water outside because I'm crazy and I like to make moon water when it's full moon and I leave water outside. I'm trying to think of a reason why there would be water outside, but that's why. And so I stare at this water bottle and I'm like looking at it and I'm like, screw you, water bottle. I'm not thirsty. And then I look at it and I'm like, well, maybe I will drink it. Like, are you talking about like that? Like just little subtle things?
It could be anything. Yeah, you can ignore
The
your
fact that
drive to
you're
drink.
using the water bottle in itself as a marketing thing.
Like the pure survival thing of drinking water. You could make the argument is a marketing thing to keep you alive. Like it's an argument to make you drink water, but you don't have to. You don't have to drink any water. You'll die of thirst, of course. But there's nothing that says that you have to drink water. It's all trying to nudge you and push you around. So when you stare at that water bottle outside, the marketing thing is to the marketing ploy is drink this water, right? That's the argument.
But
And
I
then
feel like
your
you're
thirst
just,
drive pushes it.
you're just describing like existence.
Yeah, but that's the way the marketing, industrial complex sees everything. Everything is marketing. Everything.
I know, but
if
you can
they
describe everything to everything at the same time.
You can everything then.
You
There's
can everything then.
There's a strong arm steady songs that starts off with everything is everything. Shit is getting heavy, man. Anyway, but like you, in order to go snowboarding, you need a Subaru. Now you don't. You need a car to get to the mountains. No, you don't. You need a snowboard to snowboard.
do.
No,
No,
you
you
don't.
don't.
I
No, you
do
don't.
though.
Cut down a tree
Yep.
and make it yourself.
Yeah.
Or you could.
just get a piece of wood, just some really strong bark or something. You don't need to chop down the tree, poor trees. But you could. There, those ideas that are in your head, most of them you don't really need. But you get into like minimalism and all that. But I think, like it's like one of those Matrix blue pill, red pill type things of like realizing that everything around you is a rhetorical argument.
Yeah, I can see it.
I mean, yeah, I dig it. That's a cool like thought experiment for sure.
Yeah. And by the way, how gross is this? How
It's
gross.
Yeah, that whole I've been
Isn't it
staring
so
at
gross?
that eyeball
Oh,
all
too.
night.
I
And it has,
really
like-
want eggs.
And it has a mite. Look, I chose a
Ew.
picture where there's a mite in the photo, you guys. That's
Why
terrible.
wouldn't you have chosen the one with the crocodile and the butterflies on its head?
I don't know.
From
I
the
was
article
using.
you shared?
I know. I should have because
Where's
this is
the-
disgusting.
Hideous.
Where's the logo? Don't we have like one of the little eye things too that usually are inside the little eye things?
Yeah,
Then
I don't
again,
know.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
And things are allowed to be creepy looking. I mean,
Yeah.
it's growing on me. It's kind of like a
But like, are those flecks in there like parasites?
Just blood veins, maybe?
just
No.
veins.
Oh, those flecks, the
Oh, the little
speckle.
dots.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you buy a Canon.
This episode is brought to you by
Icon.
Icon. Oh, by the way, I've got like a new 90s song for us. It would go what's in your head? In your head.
Good old zombie.
Lizard brain. Lizard brain. Lizard brain. All
right.
I was purposely trying to drag a song that bad.
They could do pops in and out of the shirt every time. They lizard brain. You just pop in real fast. They're punching real fast and then punch out and then punch in and then punch out.
I think
Be
that's
great.
the winner. I think it is.
All right.
Don't find someone to cover it. I'm not singing it.
Yeah, me neither.
I was trying to get it out. I got like super nervous and tongue tied, but yeah, no, I'm not a singer. So but I think if we could hire somebody to do that cover, and yeah, we could project.
Who do you think we are?
I'm just saying, I've got big
Not
plans
hiring
post pandemic. We're gonna have like karaoke, and we're gonna do like a whole stage, and we'll have projectors of lizard eyes
What?
floating
Maybe we could get one of those like
to sell the shirts.
maybe
Sorry,
get one of
we're
those
talking
like
nonsense now.
deep fake like AI voices to do it, and then we could just do that for
There you
that song, and then pick a singer. We can have whoever.
Or we
Yes.
could have like Siri say it,
That
what
also
is in
works.
your head?
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up as us for tonight.
Wow,
Thank
it's
you
real
guys.
quick.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate you. We hope you have a wonderful evening. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you have any comments, please let us know. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. Please consider giving us a thumbs up. We really appreciate it. Other than that, you guys stay out there, and we'll catch you Friday night at 8. Until next time, Cognauts, we'll see you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.
Weird.